Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning. Welcome to Everything Co-op this morning. This is Vernon Oakes, and my guest today is Margaret Lund. Good morning, Margaret.
Good morning, Vernon.
How are you today?
I am great and honored to be here.
Thank you for taking out time for being here. Where are you this morning?
I am at home in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Okay. And it turns out I'm on the road. I'm in Oklahoma, right outside of Oklahoma City, on my way to Albuquerque. Mm-hmm. I hope to visit the Zuni tribe in Albuquerque. They have artists have gotten together and created a co-op, and I'm looking to buy my Christmas gifts out there to the Zuni Pueblo art. That's where I'm headed next. So we're going to talk about unsung heroes. What is that?
What is an unsung hero? Okay. Well, it's a hero.
Okay.
So it's somebody who embodies all of the attributes of a hero, of inspiring people and being brave and selfless and having vision and all of that stuff. But it's somebody whose leadership has not been recognized, has not been appropriately recognized. So they're doing all the hard work, but maybe they haven't got all the attention that somebody else has. And so this whole project is an effort to shine a little light on some really amazing people who have contributed to our co-op movement that maybe a lot of people don't even know about, and that certainly haven't gotten the accolades that they deserve.
Oh, fantastic. I'm glad you're doing that work. So how did you get into this business? Where did you grow up? Let's start there.
So I grew up here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and there's a lot of co-ops around, as you know. Yeah. And it's a little bit of a family business. I mean, my dad was on the early board of a group health cooperative, which was a consumer co-op, and then he was also an early board member of the National Co-op Bank.
Your father? So
yes. My father, Dean Lund. Yeah. So
you got it at his knee? You
a little bit, not in a direct way, but we certainly had to drive way out of our way, to go to the co-op gas station. The gas station. So you get it. And my parents were members of the early food co-ops. There's tons of food co-ops here in the Twin Cities from the 1971, I think, the earliest one. So it's when I was a kid. So I remember being taken to those stores by my mom.
So food co-ops, group health, co-op gas station. And see, I knew nothing about co-ops growing up in West Virginia. My father worked on a railroad. My grandfather worked in the mines. They're laborers. My mother went back to school and started teaching when I was 13. But there was no sort of business. There wasn't, in particular, was no co-ops. It was not at all. So I sort of envy you that you got it at an early age. This co-op world. Okay. Did you get any lessons from your dad or mom as you're going into these co-ops, or did you learn?
Yeah, not directly. I mean, they never directed us to say this is what you should do with your career or anything. But certainly I got the idea of my mom was in public service. She worked for the state of Minnesota. So the idea that, you're using your professional ability, right? Not for self-aggrandizement or even for your own, I grew up in a solid, stable home. So they certainly made a salary at what they were doing. But, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be, whatever, a venture capitalist, or I'm going to make the most money. It was really about the community. It was about public service. It was about, that's kind of an obligation that we have if we have some talents, to use those talents, not just for ourselves, but for other people. And I think also the idea of the institution, and that certainly is really a part of co-ops and a part of my dad's work, was working to build an institution that would last beyond you and that would serve other people. So it's not just you or your neighbors or your family, but it was like, what about somebody you don't even know? What about a family or the next generation and the next one. So the idea of building these institutions that are really directed at service. I mean, that's a co-op thing, right? Not for profit, but for service. And so I think that was kind of the values that were, and again, my mom did it in the public sector, and my dad did it in the cooperative sector. But there's a lot of the same kinds of impetus, I think, in their careers.
You said not for blank, but for service.
Yeah, it's a credit union, I think, thing. It's like, it's not for profit, but for service.
Okay.
Right? So co-ops are about service. Service to your members. So it sort of distinguishes from a broad nonprofit, which, is probably helping kind of the world in general or whatever. And co-ops are more focused on, on service to their members. But that also is it's a community-based kind of activity.
So did your parents belong to a credit union also?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, group health, gas station, food co-op, credit union.
Yeah, state employees credit union.
Okay. And not for profit, but for service. And that service is for the members.
Yeah.
Right,
but part of the co-ops is anybody can be a member, right? Like, so it's not just, it's not an elite thing. It's like a thing for regular people.
Anybody can be a member. But when you say a state employee credit union, at one point, only the state employees could be members.
Right, that's true.
It was designed for whatever the credit union was designed for whatever group it was designed for. In this case, state employees, credit union, those were the members. But it could be any state employee not based on race or religion or gender. None of those things came in. It was if you're a state employee, you can join.
Right.
That's what you mean by anybody. Anybody can join as a state employee.
Right, exactly. Right. Okay. So it's not just the people in professional jobs, right? It's anybody.
Okay.
Anybody that worked, in any capacity. So, yeah.
And then the focus of it, and we talk about the credit union. We could talk about the health. We could talk about the gas station. We could talk about the food co-op. But the focus is how can I provide products and services that are best for those members?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was part of certainly my dad's early work with group health. And that's a very, healthcare is obviously a really long, complicated industry. But the idea was, can consumers or whatever, patients get together and work with doctors? It was pretty unique in that sense of working collaboratively with doctors to say, can we just make the world a little different? Can we, care for patients in a way that is better and more predictable so people don't get these, enormous gotcha bills that we still have a problem with. So, so I mean, that's kind of the idea of co-ops in general is like, can we work together and we're going to each bring our own skills, our own background or whatever it is, the assets, that we have. Some of which are money, but some of which, are not, our enthusiasm and experience and everything. And can we build something better? Can we build an institution that actually serves the community better, than a for-profit institution? I mean, so I think that just runs across all kinds of co-ops, any kind of co-op.
So co-op, I have come to, they have 3 P's, 3 things that they're interested in priority. First is people. You talk about the members. Mm-hmm. The second is the planet. Environment, making sure the environment is good, and the third is profit. You have to make a profit, but it's not the number one driver. The number one driver is what's best for the people, what's best for the members.
Exactly, and I do in my work. I do a lot of work in finance, so I have to talk to people about profit or surplus or whatever in their co-ops. But it really is. It's like a tool. That's all it is. It is like not the thing at the top. It's like, necessary constraint, to living in the world is that you have to have enough money to pay your rent or whatever it is you have to do. And you want to be able to pay people who are working for you and all of that stuff. So, so that's the focus of co-ops in terms of their profitability or their surplus is, we have to make enough money to pay everybody and be a good citizen and a good employer. But that's not the main thing. Like, that's not where you win, right? You're not like, oh, okay, I did that. Now I'm done. You're like, okay, I did that. Now I have the tools to do what's really important. And what's really important is, serving the world and meeting the needs of the members and being creative and creating a new way to do something or whatever. That's the real work of co-ops. It's not making the money.
So, Margaret, what I like about this already is we've talked about group health, gas stations, food co-ops, state employees credit union. And so this co-op could be any kind of business. Any kind of business could be a co-op.
Any kind of business, absolutely. And that's one of the things I do in my consulting practice. I work all kinds of industries. I work with worker co-ops and consumer co-ops and small farmer co-ops and, small business co-ops and all kinds, because it really is just about people identifying a need, who's my group, who are my collaborators I'm going to work with, and what can we do together that we can't do separately? I mean, that's really the whole question. What can we do to better, right? Do I have a problem, or do I see an opportunity, and can I do it better if I work with somebody else? So, yeah, and that's actually, to get back to Unsung Heroes, I was really impressed, not just with Ella Jo Baker, but some of the other applications that we worked on, the way that some really early African-American leaders really looked comprehensively they looked at co-ops as a way to help their community in all kinds of ways. I mean, they were talking about ecosystems, 100 years ago. We're talking about ecosystems and co-ops now like it's a new idea, and a lot of these early co-op leaders, because they were thinking about consumer co-ops and worker co-op. I mean, at the same time, Ella Jo Baker, absolutely. And some of the other people who we did nominations for, who hopefully will be selected in future years, also really looked at cooperatives as kind of a comprehensive organizing tool, and not as a, only works in this sector, or only works in this situation, or only works for these kinds of people, or whatever. They were like, no, this is a tool for everybody. Let's go.
So I want to get to Ella Jo Baker and Unsung Heroes, but I want to define for people, some people that have listened to this show already heard this, but I have broken down to 4 sectors of co-ops, and you mentioned one is a worker. The type of sector depends on who owns and controls the business. Mm-hmm. If the employees own and control the business, it's called a worker co-op. That makes it really, really easy. And that's any business you can think about. If the employees own and control that business, it's a worker co-op. If the people that buys the products or services in the business own it, then it's a consumer co-op. And you've already mentioned a food co-op, a credit union, a group health. If the patients own the business, yeah, then it's a consumer co-op. So that's in Ella Jo Baker and other unsung heroes, African Americans. That's what Jessica Gordon Nimhard's book Collective Carriage showed. Early on, as you have said, that co-ops can be a comprehensive way. The other 2 types are a marketing co-op. That's a group of people or businesses, could be a marketing co-op. They come together and they take their products and put them into this business, and then the business markets them. So they can get to different markets, perhaps add value. When they add value, call it a producer co-op, Cabot Creamery, Ocean Spray. There's a lot of them out there. And the 4th one is a purchasing co-op. And farmers use marketing co-ops and purchasing co-ops, and that's as they come together, they form the business. The business then buys all of the products that they need to farm. Or there's one CPA in D.C., Community Purchasing Alliance. They were buying what was needed for churches and schools. We have so much to talk about, Miss Margaret Lund. Mm-hmm. We have so much to talk about. And we're getting ready to take our first break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about, I want to talk about the different principles of cooperation, because you've already mentioned some. And then I want to talk more about these unsung heroes. Like, how did you get started in this? It's where I really want to start is, how did you get started, and what is this program now? Okay. We'll be right back, everybody. Please don't touch that dial. WOL. Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes, and the program is Everything Cooperative. We have Margaret Lund as our guest. She's an independent consultant in the cooperative world. We're talking about unsung heroes, and we've already talked about her growing up in Minneapolis, and her father was in a lot of co-ops, and her mother was a public servant. And they believe in working together, building institutions that help the community, that help more than just themselves. And that's the world she grew up in. So, Margaret, tell us a little bit more about this unsung hero, what it is in the co-op world. What is this program right now?
Okay, sure. Well, as you know, 'cause we've served together in the committee before. So the cooperative movement has its own co-op Hall of Fame, and 3 or 4 people are inducted every year, and they're leaders from all different sectors in different parts of the country, and that kind of stuff. So that's been around, I don't know, since the 70s or something. I can't remember. I should know that. And, I've had some involvement. I've been on the committee a couple times. I was on a little personal quest to diversify the Hall of Fame because it's full of great people, but almost all of them are men. In fact, practically all of them are men, and practically all of them are white. And, and most of them come from bigger co-ops and richer co-ops. And so I've written a couple. I wrote Jessica Gordon Emphart's application for the Co-op Hall of Fame, and she's a Hall of Famer now. And I was on her organizing committee. I led her organizing committee. I wrote the application for the first worker co-op person to be in the Co-op Hall of Fame because there was no representation of that sector before.
Who was that?
Steve Dawson is his name. So he was involved in starting. One of the people, not the only person, Cooperative Home Care Associates in New York, which is the largest worker-owned home care worker-owned co-op in the United States.
1,500 member cooperative.
Yes, amazing.
Okay,
yes.
Home health care. They've been on the show. The current executive director.
Yeah, they're amazing. Yeah, Audrey's. Well, they all are amazing. I just love them. I'm sure they're great guests. Yeah, so and then Steve worked the rest of his career to help other worker-owned co-ops. So I wrote Clark Arrington's application, who's another African-American educator who works in co-ops and teaches co-ops. So anyway, I've been involved in the committee before, and of course I read Jessica's book, Collective Courage. which is a really, I just think, again, I'm sure she's been on your show and she'll be on
five
it again.
times. 5 times.
Yeah, it's amazing. Right, and it should be 10 because it's so rich. It's like, what a rich story that nobody knew about. As you said, like people told her, oh, there's no history, and it just buried because it was dangerous, right? It was dangerous to be an African American organizer, so it's hard to find the research, and and people didn't have the same. It's like whatever. They weren't really big, successful, rich.
Before you go
co-ops.
Any further, you mentioned a couple of things. What Jessica said to us on the air was when she first started looking, which is now about 22 years ago, started doing the research. She was told that the only people that did co-ops were white hippies, tofu-eating hippies, because that's food co-ops, and it was hippies that said, we can do this better, and we can work with organic foods, and we can not pollute the planet. There's a lot we can do. And they were in the mainstay. They were in the media, and nobody else was. And so people didn't even believe that blacks were into cooperation. And she just found everywhere, anywhere, blacks have a tremendous history. W.E.B. Du Bois, Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks took some training in a school that talked about, and Jessica has all of this stuff in her book. It's just amazing. It's Collective Courage is the name of the book. And you mentioned something else that Jessica has talked about was that people wouldn't say they were in co-ops, particularly blacks, because they were also teaching people, and that was illegal in a lot of places to teach blacks how to read and write and think and process and govern and all of these things. And once it became known that the black co-op was successful, too often folks in power, which were normally white folks, didn't like it for whatever reason, and they would either didn't want the competition or didn't want blacks to have any power, and they would take, bomb, steal, whatever. And so, yes, a lot was done secretively.
Right. So it was secretive, and also, as you said, it was just like people would they'd burn down their stores, or they bought or something like that. So which is not to say, to take away from the achievements of someone who's maybe today is working at a co-op that still exists, and see this great co-op. You're like, well, other people tried hard too, right? Mm-hmm. and they faced a lot of obstacles. So maybe it's not entirely their fault that that their co-op doesn't exist anymore. So anyway, I read her book, and I know obviously I know Jessica from around, from the co-op community. So I just thought of this idea, and I was, I was like reading the New York Times recently, a couple of years ago, started their overlooked series of obituaries, which are just fascinating. So they're obituaries of people, that should have been in the New York Times, right? But that weren't. So all kinds of really interesting people, and Major League Baseball, as if you're a baseball fan, they've recently decided to include the stats of the Negro League in their statistics because they should, because that's the right thing to do. So I was just kind of thinking, like, other people are doing this. Other people are saying maybe our lens was a little not right. Maybe our lens was a little narrow, or maybe our lens wasn't really seeing everything that that was out there, right? And so, I had this idea, and I talked to Jessica about it. So we're really the instigators. So I would say she's the inspiration.
Okay, you're the instigator, she's the inspiration. Okay.
We can divide our work that way. But we worked on it together, and then we brought the idea to Leslie Mead, was the head of the Co-op Development Foundation, and and Leslie loved the idea, and then she really advocated within the structure of the Co-op Development Foundation, which is where the Hall of Fame is housed, to to make sure that this happened. But it was really important to us, not to make it like a special little award on the side. I mean, we use the same criteria. It's not an easier, application or an easier thing to do. In fact, in some ways, it's a lot harder because, it's harder to find the information about people. So it was important to us that it really be part of the regular Hall of Fame. I mean, it's using a pool of candidates, maybe from an earlier time period or from groups of people that haven't, been had sufficient attention, kind of pay to their work. But it's not a junior award or anything like that. It's absolutely the same as anybody else, and people need to, it's competitive. We had three really good. You were on the committee, Verna. We almost went to an end tie vote on who got the first one. Because they're good ones. There's so many good ones.
So I've been on the selection committee maybe 9 of the last 12 years of the Co-op Hall of Fame. And I have found that it's very difficult because there's a lot of great people in this co-op world really doing things that helps humanity, that helps the U.S., that helps the world. Like you said, they're focused on what's best for community, not necessarily what's best for me, but what's best for community. And they do it with groups and teams of people. They cooperate. And so it was the same thing with Ella Jo Baker and the other 2 candidates that you and Jessica had brought forth. They're just tremendous amount of history and tremendous amounts of things that they had accomplished, that it was difficult. It was very difficult. And I'm really glad that you had this idea, looking at what other people are doing, to go back and highlight people. Now, it was interesting to me that the first 3 people that you brought forth of Unsung Hero were Black and women. Mm-hmm. So did you find any men or anybody else besides Black people?
Well, that's a good question. So there's a lot of people in Jessica's book that can and should be honored. Partly we let we didn't write the applications. I mean, CDF generously gave a small grant for researchers, because one of the things about Unsung Heroes is this research is a lot harder to do than somebody who's a contemporary, who's living, who works in an organization which has a lot of records and everything like that. I mean, this is these are hard facts to find. So we gave people research grants. And I certainly, we had our ideas of, probably the 4 or 5 people that really should be in the first group. But, the researchers, they got to pick, who they were kind of passionate about writing about, who they wanted to do. So that's how we got the specific 3 women that were the first applicants. But, that's a really interesting question. I don't remember. I don't think we did. And I certainly don't remember Jessica and I having an explicit conversation about, it has to be. But I think we really felt like, okay, the first one has to be an African-American woman. It just has to be, because there's just so much. Again, Ella Jo Baker was not the only one. The first 5 people that came to my mind were all American women. And so I thought that was, that was a deserving honor to make sure that was the first person that got the Unsung Heroes Award. But it's not. I mean, certainly men, you can apply any, really the criteria has to do with the time period. They're working in a time period, maybe that the Co-op Hall of Fame didn't exist, or they came from a group that was overlooked, and that there are lots of ways to say that.
What's the time period?
Well, we kind of said before the regular Hall of Fame started, so maybe before the 1970s. So the bulk of their activity, and obviously Ella Jo Baker lived to the 1986, but the bulk of their work, their achievements happened.
Okay, before that. Mm-hmm. It is extremely exciting because, just like we said, that there's a lot of things that would cause black people not to be known and not to be out there. And there's a lot of things in our society, racism being at the top of it, that would cause the greater society not to recognize black folk. But that can also happen with Asians, with Native Americans, with Hispanics. So that's why I said, yeah.
Absolutely.
We can clearly see it for blacks. We can clearly see it for women. And that's why it makes sense for it to be a black woman. But we're going to take our second break. And I would like to come back and talk a little bit more about CDF, more about the unsung hero, and eventually I want to get into the future. What do you see the future being? Okay, we'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial. Thank you. We're back, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes, and the program is Everything Cooperative. Margaret Lund is our guest today. Margaret, the National Cooperative Bank has been our sponsor for the 9 years. We're almost 9 years on air right now. October will be the 9th year. October is co-op month. October is my birthday. October is when we started. October is a great month. We're talking about the unsung heroes and CDF. So can you tell us a little bit about what Cooperative Development Foundation is, CDF?
Sure. It's a 501c3 organization. It's really the affiliate of the National Co-op Business Association. So NCBA is a different kind of nonprofit because they do lobbying and things like that. And CDF is really it's the 501c3 development educational arm, really nationally of the movement. And so they've got a look on their website, a bunch of interesting not just grant programs but also programs where they've helped fund research and tools and stuff for organizing and development. So yeah, they're a great resource for us. And then they house the Co-op Hall of Fame, so they oversee the ceremony, but also the committee, the selection process.
So cdf.coop, you could go to their webpage, particularly if you're looking to start a co-op or if you look for funding. They have different funds to help co-ops. And also when there's a tragedy, they will help give monies to different co-ops that have found themselves in disasters, whatever it may be, fires, storms, whatever the tragedy might be. So it's a great group of people. cdf.coop. Was it difficult when you took this idea of unsung heroes? Margaret Lund used to be the executive director. When you took this to them, was it difficult sort of selling and pitching this idea?
Well, Leslie at CDF, Leslie loved the idea, so it wasn't difficult to sell it to her. But there's a whole structure and bureaucracy and a board and everything that that it needs to get through. So I think we started organizing in early 2021. And so we're having the first ceremony. It's less than 2 years. That's pretty fast, for an institution to move. Because they're like, do we have time to do it this year? And we did have to, have a special committee this year because the committee had already met for this class of people. But in the future, it will be the regular committee that will do the selection. So, yeah.
No, that's quick from 2021 to 2022.
Yeah.
I was thinking it was a 5 to 10 year process to get something approved and going. You guys, but it's you and Jessica doing it, so I got it. Okay, you can get it done very, very quickly. So, what does it look like for you? And now, how can one get an unsung hero? If Vernon Oakes wanted somebody to be recognized, what would I have to do?
Okay, so the Unsung Heroes is, it's part of the regular process. So the applications are always due on August 15th, and you go to heroes.coop and, you can get the application, right? But in terms of the Unsung Heroes in particular, I thought it was really important that CDF gave a research grant to the 3 researchers that we had working on these 3 applications. And I believe, I can't speak for them, but I believe they're going to do that again. So I think if anybody out there has an idea of someone that of that's an unsung hero, and again, it can be anybody that belongs to a group that, hasn't, that you feel like hasn't gotten the attention for their work or for, the impact they've had in their communities or whatever. I think they should contact CDF and say, I'm interested in doing an application. And then they will have I think they will be giving, research grants again to encourage a lot of good applications because, because that's important. So yeah. And then also, of course, the regular Hall of Fame is also open. So, we were talking before about a lot of the Unsung Heroes work is historical. So anybody can nominate anybody, right, to the Co-op Hall of Fame. So that you can also go the regular route if it's a person that's contemporary or who, much of their work has been done in the last 50 years. You can certainly do that. So they are not, mutually exclusive. I mean, this is not an idea like this is the only place that, women and people of color are going to be honored, because that is not the case. It can be honored all over the place, but it's just a particular opportunity for people whose work historically just, isn't really very well known.
So, all right, I have a couple ideas. One is Marion Barry, the mayor of life of Washington, D.C. Bad reputation that the media gave him and the FBI gave him. But the reason he was mayor for life in the district where I've lived for the last 35 years was he did a lot of good for black people. And he put in laws for co-ops early on. In 1967, the Federation of Southern Co-ops became an entity, incorporated, but they had to come to D.C. because the laws in D.C., they didn't have laws in Georgia. They still don't have laws in Alabama and in a lot of those southern states for co-ops. But D.C. had those laws. So Marion Barry had a bad reputation in the media, but in the neighborhood, in the amount of work that he did for black people, he was loved, extremely loved, and still is. And the other one's the Black Panthers. They had a very, very bad reputation. But co-ops was part of what they wanted to do and was about doing. And I'm not exactly sure yet in the Black Panthers, but I just found out that they were developed in Loudoun County, Alabama, which is one of the small, most depressed economic counties in the United States. And they did a lot of good, but it's not known. And they did a lot of good in the neighborhood and the community for black people. But again, it's not known, and co-ops was high in their priorities. So yeah, there's just a lot of history here. But you said I get an application. Okay, where do I go?
Absolutely.
Where do I go get an application? And anybody else out there?
Yeah. Well, the application for the Co-op Hall of Fame is, I think it's heroes.coop. We should look that up. But yeah, the Co-op Development Foundation. Send them an email and say, how do I apply? Because I don't know, it's just so new. I'm not sure we have a special thing. I should know this on the website for CDF for the, Unsung Heroes, but there will be a place for Unsung Heroes. So they could say, here's, kind of the criteria and here's how you could do it.
Okay. So it is heroes.coop, HEROES. I just looked it up, .coop. And when you look it up, the 2022 Cooperative Hall of Fame is going to be at the National Press Club on October the 6th. That's the other reason. And October 7th is my birthday. So I always have it that they celebrate this Co-op Hall of Fame in line with my birthday. Okay. Sometimes it's on my birthday. And Ella Jo Baker, Alan Gallant, Paul Hazen, Gary Oakland, and Dan Waddle. And what's interesting this year, on the regular Co-op Hall of Fame, there were 4 white men. And they was also noted in the meeting. But it just happened to be that way. Most of the time there are some blacks and there are some women, but this year it was 4 white men. So it's a good year to bring in Ella Jo Baker to put some color into this array. And there are pictures that when you go look at the cooperative, if you go look at heroes.coop, HEROES.coop, you'll see that. And then the schedule of events, the sponsors, but I don't yet see, at the top, Home 2021, issues form, nominations, photos. What is the Co-op Hall of Fame? It talks about it all on the webpage. Okay, but I still don't see an application. Okay.
All right, we'll talk to CDF about getting it, particularly the Unsung Heroes application up so people are clear on that criteria, and if there's a research grants available for people to do the research.
And do you know how much the research grant is?
I believe they were $2,500 this year. So again, I can't speak for CDF, but so not whatever a fortune, but enough to pay somebody to do some good work. I think.
I do too.
We got good work this year from our researchers.
Yeah, it's more than I thought, but it is a lot of work. $2,500. per application.
Yeah, don't quote me on it, but I think that's what we did. So we should.
Well, I'm quoting you on air, but I hear what you said.
Yeah, right. Which wasn't my. Yeah.
All right. So if anybody out there, if you know of somebody that's been working in this co-op world and you'd like for them to be honored, honored in the Hall of Fame, then you would go to heroes.coop or cdf.coop and ask for an application. And I'm going to keep doing some research because I may want to see about trying to find somebody to do the research for Marion Barry. Very serious about getting his name in there. And then we'll see who else. There's just a tremendous, as I crisscross back and forth across the country, of people and read Jessica's book and talk to people that have just done so much for co-ops, and people don't know about it. And I think that's the first place to getting more co-ops organized, is to know that there is a history here, and it's a rich history.
Yeah, I think that's true. I wanted to say just something too about particularly the women, Ella Jo Baker, but also the other two women who we did applications and who will still be in the running, next year and the year after. Is so it's not, it wasn't just like for women. It's not just that whatever people weren't recognizing, or there weren't a lot of roles for people of color, but in particular being women, they also were constrained even within the movement and the kinds of roles that they were given to perform, and those tended to be support roles, not upfront roles. And so I really was struck in all these applications. Helena Wilson was another one of the applications, was really a leader in consumer co-ops. The way that women really saw consumer co-ops in particular as, as the co-ops as a vehicle for empowerment for people like them, and like people's dollars. Like they said, everybody has dollars. You're buying and I'm buying, and and that their role as women, as like, even if, as homemakers, that was actually a powerful role and an important role in the economy, not just a passive role, but it was like they were economic agents, through their purchasing dollars. And we made that real and made that powerful through coordinating their purchasing dollars for each of their families individually. So I was just really struck by people seeing co-ops as the tool for, for different levels of empowerment within them, and not just consumer co-ops, worker co-ops too. One of our other applicants was Nanny Helen Burroughs, who's from Washington D.C., so you know her, right? Mm-hmm. So she was, part of her work was helping women, and again mostly women of color, who worked in service because they were unprotected by any labor laws, and a lot of them were young and they would be vulnerable. They'd be working in someone's house, and there'd be like some creepy person doing something, and they didn't really have any, like, they weren't in a workplace, they were in somebody's home, they didn't have anything to do. And she really saw, and again, I'm talking about Nanny Helen Burroughs, like, she was like, we need to create different jobs for people, like co-ops, like, we need you to, you people, you need a better job, you need a more respectful job, and that co-ops were the way to do that. So I was, again, just really struck with people seeing co-ops naturally as the vehicle for self-help and self-determination, and to help people who are not, people like themselves, who are not powerful in their existing institutions or their lives or their worlds. They just gravitated, like, co-ops are the way that we can do this. So that's just really, that warmed my heart.
So Nanny Helen Burroughs, I take the exit off the freeway to go home. So I see her name
yeah.
1, 2, 3 times a day. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of it, well, not quite the end of it, but there's her school that she started. And she started bought a farm, started several different co-ops. And we'll be right back. As I told you earlier, this hour goes by very quickly.
Yeah.
And I want to talk to you in the next segment about where you see the future, particularly for co-ops, people of color, coming out of COVID. Where can you see, not only from a lens of history today, but what does the future look like to Margaret Lund? We'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial.
$14.50 WOL, where information is power.
Information is power, and that's why we are here, to give you information about co-ops so that you can use that information. You get the power when you use the information. And that's what happened in 1919 with Cabot creamery. 94 families started Cabot in Vermont. They started a co-op. It is a producer co-op where they bring their milk and then Cabot churn that into cheese and all kinds of different products. And it's award-winning cheddar cheese. It is great, and they're a great partner with us. And Margaret, we were talking about unsung heroes in the past and what they've done. And anybody out there, if you have somebody that you want to put into the unsung heroes, you can go to cdf.coop and /cooperative-education, and you can get all information about it. But this Co-op Hall of Fame was announced in 1974 at the Cooperative League of the U.S. And this is what Ella Jo Baker had started. This cooperative league is the Youth Cooperative League of young people in co-ops. But way back in 1974, they announced it. Okay, and then that is quite interesting. Then Ella Jo Baker, and earlier in that, I can't remember what year, but she was given a grant from NCBA to study about co-ops. So there's been this mixture of Ella Jo Baker, the Cooperative League, NCBA, Hall of Fame throughout time, but she still didn't get recognized until now. Mm-hmm. So we talk about this history. And for all of the different reasons, there was not recognition. But how do you see the future? What do you see is for us in the future, particularly as it relates to co-ops?
Yeah, that's a good question. We can see. I mean, it's a tough world out there, and in some ways, I was struck again reading these applications are 100 years ago, and we're still dealing with many of the same challenges, and maybe as we were dealing with then, despite all the changes in the world, but. If we're going to be optimistic, which I usually am, I was just at a meeting about employee ownership, and people were noting that in the United States, there's two ways to employee ownership. There's employee stock ownership plans and worker co-ops, and that the number of employee stock ownership plans has been pretty stagnant, for I don't know, a decade or something like that. There's a they're good, right? But there aren't that many more. And the thing is, there aren't that many worker co-ops in the U.S., but there's twice as many as there were, just a couple years ago. So that sector is really vibrant, and I think that's really speaking to people. And I also was really struck. We haven't talked a lot. You just mentioned it about youth, but Ella Jo Baker, of course, her original organizing place was the Youth Cooperative League, right? Young Negroes Cooperative League. And the other people as well, Nanny Helen Burroughs. I mean, she was working with youth. So that's a really important, I think, a really important thing because, again, these leaders, these women who came out of extremely challenging situations, they really thought it was important, and I believe they were correct in that, to work with youth and say that, co-ops are a way that young people can build a different world, right? Like a different thing. And, we talk a lot today about, the student debt. I mean, there just aren't the opportunities for young people that there might have been, for previous generations. And co-ops are, again, it's not easy work. It's not a slam dunk at all. It's hard work. It's very hard work. But they are a way, that you can join with people who are like you and create, if you don't like the world that you're seeing out there, it's a way to create something different. So I'm hoping we'll have a renaissance, maybe a little bit of a renaissance with worker co-ops, and I'm hoping that will, extend to a lot of sectors and to young people who feel like they don't, see a lot in old people's world, that welcomes them. It's well, let's just go create something then.
Okay, and Esteban Kelly, who
I do know, yes.
Esteban is in charge of the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops.
Yeah.
He'll be on next Thursday. And I see Esteban as a young person. He may be 40, I don't know, but he looks like and has the energy of a 20-year-old. Okay. So he's bang. But he'll be on next week talking about worker co-ops and the kinds of things that are happening now. And I just tell people, if you see a problem out there in your community and 3 or 4 of you want to solve it, just start a worker co-op and solve it. Start a business and solve whatever you see. That could be taxis, it could be home health care we've already mentioned, and CDF has a home health care conference. It's free. You can do it online every year and get the information that you need to start a business, whatever that business might be, whatever you think it may be, whatever you like doing or where you see a problem. It is hard work. Yes.
It is hard
You've said
work.
that 2 or 3 times. What makes it hard work?
A number of things. I mean, it's hard to work with other people. It's certainly a lot easier to be in charge. I mean, absolutely, right? We aren't taught in school. We aren't taught communication skills or, whatever, how to get along. So that's something people have to do. And I'm absolutely, communication is a learned skill, and we can all learn it, and we can all be better at it, and we can all, and that will make the world a better place. Partly that's hard, right? And partly we don't have all the institutional structures in the U.S. I mean, we're a pretty individual-oriented society in general, and we don't have all the structures that they do in some other countries. But we can build those structures, and NCBA and CDF are part of that. So again, I don't think that that gets in the way, but I don't think that needs to stop people. So yeah, I think I feel like a lot of, many people have said this, but a lot of the things that are rewarding are difficult. That's part of what's rewarding about it when you actually get something done, or it feels like more of an achievement. It's a team sport. It's a team effort. Anyone who's been on a team, and I have to mention this, Vernon. You have to let me mention this on the air because
Go ahead.
It didn't get in Ella Jo Baker's. I had to edit it out. I'm the one that edited. But one of my very favorite things that Ajwa, who's the researcher for the Ella Jo Baker application, that Ajwa uncovered was, okay, so Ella Jo Baker, right? She's incredibly intelligent and a great organizer and a great communicator, and everybody loves to work with her. It's like, but what did she really like, Vernon? What she really liked was playing basketball.
Okay.
She loved to play basketball. She was born in 1903, so we're talking about the teens, right? And she said, and Ajwa found this quote, was like, I'd rather play basketball than eat. And I just love that. I was like, goodness sakes, if there's an WNBA back then, right, we might be poor in the co-op community because her energy might have been diverted. But, that also said to me, partly means like she was athletic, she was adventurous for a girl. Just think of the 19 teens, right? The girl's like, what I really wanted to is play the sport. That was even very new, right? But so that's the teamwork part. So to me, and I was a basketball player in high school and Division III college, and it was the 80s, so it's not what it is today. But I was a basketball player, right? But so that's like, it's like, why do people like doing that, right? Like they like being on a team, and the team is better because everybody's good at their positions, and then they're really good. And when you feel like we all work together, we all contributed, and went boom, 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 right? Then that just feels great. And that's like what co-ops feel like when they're good. It's not easy, right? It's not easy to do that. And that's partly why it feels great when it's done. But, and then again, with co-ops, you're building institutions, other people benefit, so I think in the long view also helps, I think, people keep up their energy.
I just want to add something really quick here, because I've been married twice. The first one ended in a divorce. The second one ended in death, unfortunately, cancer. But the problem is always with communications and money. Mm-hmm. Okay, and the money part of it was making decisions together, if you will, governance. How do two people decide something? Who has the most power to say, yes, we're going to do this or no? It's very difficult. It's easier if there's 3 to have a vote, but it's even better if you can figure out and learn how to have consensus management and consensus government. So that's communications and governance makes it difficult in a co-op. But learning that helps everything in the world, including marriage or anything else you want to do.
Absolutely. No, you see that all sorts of, when people talk about the difference that their co-op leadership has made, helps them talk to their landlords, it helps them in their workplace, it helps them in their relationships, so that it's not time wasted. People often talk about like, oh, it takes so long to make a decision or whatever. But, it's like, you're doing more than just making a decision. You're really helping people exercise a different part of their brain and their heart, right?
Yeah.
And that's important work. So it's interesting you said that. I do that in my training. I talk a lot about co-ops. They're about money and they're about communication.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's what they're about. But it's like, whatever. It's hard work, but it's worth it. It's good.
It's hard work and it's worth it. There's a tremendous reward. Okay, we could talk another hour about that one. Last word. You have the last word. What would you like to leave people with? 30 seconds.
Yeah, 30 seconds. I think go hug the unsung hero in your life. Go think about, that teacher, that grandma, whoever it is, that sister, whoever that is, just go tell them that you appreciate them. I think that's what we're doing here. That's what the Unsung Hero is about, is saying we appreciate you, we appreciate your work.
And I would add to that, get into a co-op, learn how to communicate, learn how to make decisions together and work together. Start your own business, do whatever you need to do. It's a tremendously rewarding. That's the other part of it. I'd rather play basketball than eat. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Margaret. It's been fun. Thank you for taking out the time and coming join us today. Everybody out there, please live cooperatively. We'll see you next Thursday with Esteban Kelly.
Okay.
1450 WOL, where information is power.